The journey to Reykjavik took 14 hours, but for the survivors aboard the Leviathan, it felt like the longest and shortest trip of their lives. Long because every minute reminded them of the friends and fellow passengers they had lost to the cold Atlantic waters. Short because for the first time in 3 days they were warm, safe, and surrounded by people who cared about keeping them alive. Captain Maria Santos woke up in the ship's medical bay, wrapped in heated blankets, with warm fluids slowly bringing her body temperature back to normal. The first thing she did was ask about her crew and passengers. Dr. Williams sat beside her bed and gently explained that 23 people had been rescued, but 24 others hadn't made it. Weiss? She asked, her voice still weak from exhaustion. He's alive, Dr. Williams smiled. Your engineer is tough. It was close, but we got his body temperature stabilized. He'll make a full recovery. Maria closed her eyes and felt tears running down her cheeks. She had been a ship captain for over 2 decades, and losing people under her command was the worst feeling in the world. But knowing that Lise and the others were safe gave her some peace. In the bed next to her, RADIO operator James Chun was telling his story to a Navy communications specialist who was documenting everything that had happened. James still couldn't believe how quickly everything had gone wrong with the Aurora's dream, and how close they had all come to dying in those lifeboats. The scariest part wasn't the storm or even the cold, James explained. It was when the radio stopped working completely on the second day. We thought nobody would ever find us. We were just tiny orange dots in an ocean bigger than most countries. The Navy specialist nodded and continued taking notes. The rescue of the Aurora's dream survivors was already being studied by maritime safety experts around the world. The story of how an advanced military vessel had saved civilians in impossible conditions was spreading faster than anyone had expected. Dr. Park had recovered enough to help treat the other survivors, working alongside Dr. Williams and his team. She had seen everyone at their lowest point during those terrible hours in the lifeboats, and now she was watching them come back to life. Cook Pedro, who had been unconscious for over 8 hours, finally woke up asking for food. The young mother and her 10-year-old daughter were holding hands and talking quietly about seeing Daddy again. Commander Mitchell spent most of the journey visiting with the survivors, hearing their stories and making sure they had everything they needed. She had commanded the Leviathan for 2 years, but this was the first time the ship had been used for a major rescue operation. Seeing the faces of the people her crew had saved made all the months of training and preparation worth it. Commander, I don't know how to thank you, Maria told Mitchell when she visited the medical bay. Your ship and your crew saved our lives. We were completely lost out there. Mitchell shook her head. Captain Santos, you and your people survived for over 40 hours in conditions that would have killed most people in half that time. We just gave you a ride to safety. The real heroes are the people who kept fighting when everything seemed hopeless. But Mitchell was being modest. Word of the rescue operation was already spreading through military and civilian channels. The Leviathan had accomplished something that maritime experts said was impossible: a successful rescue operation in hurricane-force conditions hundreds of miles from land. More importantly, it had proven that the Navy's new rapid response destroyer program could save civilian lives when conventional rescue methods failed. As the Leviathan approached Reykjavik harbor, crowds of people gathered on the docks. News of the rescue had reached Iceland hours earlier, and families of the survivors had flown in from around the world. The story had also captured the attention of international media, with reporters calling it one of the most dramatic sea rescues in recent history. The ship's crew prepared for arrival with mixed emotions. They were proud of what they had accomplished, but they also understood that this mission had revealed both the incredible capabilities of their vessel and the harsh reality of how dangerous the ocean could be. 24 people had still lost their lives. Despite everything the Leviathan could do, engineer Luis Martinez was one of the first survivors to be taken off the ship when they reached port. His family had flown in from Mexico, and his wife and children were waiting on the dock, with tears in their eyes. Lees was still weak, but he was walking on his own and talking normally. Dr. Williams had told him that he had been less than an hour away from permanent organ damage when the rescue pods found him. "I never thought I'd see them again," Lees told a reporter as he was reunited with his family. "When that storm hit and the ship started sinking, it felt like the end of the world. But these Navy people, they came for us when nobody else could. They risked their own lives to save strangers." The young mother and her daughter were met by the girl's father, who had been waiting anxiously for news since the Aurora's Dream first sent out distress calls. The 10-year-old ran to her dad and hugged him like she would never let go. Later, she told reporters that the scariest part wasn't being in the storm, but seeing her mom so scared. Radio operator James Chun had perhaps the most emotional reunion of all. His elderly parents had traveled from California, not knowing if their son was alive or dead. When James walked down the gangplank under his own power, his father broke down crying in a way that made everyone watching feel the weight of what these families had been through. Dr. Park was met by colleagues from the medical conference she had been traveling to attend in Iceland. Instead of giving presentations about medical research, she found herself being interviewed about treating hypothermia in emergency conditions. Her experience during the disaster had given her insights that would help save lives in future maritime emergencies. Captain Maria Santos was the last survivor to leave the ship. She had insisted on personally thanking every member of the Leviathan's crew who had participated in the rescue operation. As she finally walked down the gangplank, she was met by officials from the shipping company and investigators who would spend months trying to understand exactly what had caused the Aurora's Dream to sink, but the story was far from over. Within days, the rescue operation had become international news. The Leviathan's successful mission led to changes in maritime safety protocols around the world. The Rapid Response Destroyer program, which had been classified, was partially declassified so that other navies could learn from its technology. Commander Mitchell and her crew received medals and recognition from multiple countries. More importantly, the rescue proved that advanced military technology could be used to save civilian lives in ways that had never been possible before. The Leviathan became the prototype for a new generation of rescue vessels that could operate in conditions where traditional ships and aircraft couldn't go. The survivors stayed in touch with each other and with many of the Leviathan's crew members. They had shared an experience that few people could understand, the absolute worst that nature could throw at human beings, followed by rescue when all hope seemed lost. Some returned to sea eventually, while others never wanted to see the ocean again. Years later, maritime safety experts would call the Aurora's Dream rescue a turning point in how the world thought about saving lives at sea. It proved that with the right technology, training, and courage, even the most hopeless situations could have happy endings. But for the 23 survivors and the crew of the Leviathan, it would always be remembered as the day when ordinary people did extraordinary things, and nobody gave up hope even when the odds seemed impossible. Dr. Rodriguez never expected to find anything unusual that Tuesday morning. She was just another archaeologist, working on what seemed like another routine dig in the mountains of Peru. Her team had been there for 3 weeks, carefully brushing dirt off old pottery pieces and measuring ancient walls. Nothing special, just another lost city that time had forgotten. But then they found the room. It was hidden behind a wall that looked exactly like all the others. Pure luck, really. One of the workers accidentally knocked his shovel against it, and instead of the solid thud they expected, they heard something hollow. When they broke through, their flashlights revealed something that made everyone stop talking. The room was perfectly preserved. Not a single crack in the walls, no dust. No damage from thousands of years of rain and wind. It looked like someone had just walked out of it yesterday. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was what covered every single inch of the walls. Hands. Thousands and thousands of carved hands, all pressed against mouths. Men, women, children, elderly people, all with their hands covering their lips in the exact same gesture. The detail was incredible. You could see the wrinkles on their fingers, the expressions in their eyes. They all looked determined, like they were making the most important promise of their lives. Dr. Rodriguez had seen a lot of strange things in her 20 years of digging up the past, but this made her skin crawl in a way she couldn't explain. She called her team together and asked the question that was bothering everyone. What would make an entire civilization decide to stop talking? Over the next few days, they found more rooms. Each one told the same story. Families gathered together, placing their hands over their mouths. Teachers showing children how to make the gesture. Leaders addressing crowds of people who were all copying the same silent promise. It was like watching a movie with no sound. Except this movie was carved in stone and it was 5,000 years old. The team worked faster now. Word was getting out about their discovery, and soon other archaeologists started calling with impossible news. A dig site in Egypt had found the same thing, then one in China, then Mexico, then India. Everywhere humans had lived 5,000 years ago, they were finding the same carved hands, the same silent faces, the same mysterious promise. Dr. Rodriguez couldn't sleep anymore. She would lie in her tent at night thinking about those carved faces. They didn't look sad or scared. They looked ready, like they knew something terrible was coming, and this was the only way to prepare for it. The breakthrough came when they found the temple. It was bigger than anything they had discovered so far. The entrance was sealed with a massive stone door that had symbols carved deep into its surface. It took them 2 days to move it, and when they finally got inside, Dr. Rodriguez felt like she was walking into a cathedral. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. The walls were covered with the most beautiful paintings she had ever seen, but these weren't like the simple hand gestures they had found before. These told a story. The first painting showed a thriving civilization, cities that reached toward the sky, people working together, building incredible things, children playing in gardens, families sharing meals. It looked like paradise, but as they moved deeper into the temple, the paintings changed. Dark shapes appeared in the sky. At first, they were small, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully, but they grew larger with each painting. The people in the pictures started looking up more often. They gathered in groups, pointing at the sky with worried expressions. Then came the painting that made Dr. Rodriguez understand why her hands were shaking. It showed the dark shapes descending from the sky, and they weren't natural. They were ships, alien ships, and the things coming out of them. Dr. Rodriguez had to sit down when she saw them. They looked like shadows given form, with too many arms and eyes that seemed to burn even in the painted stone. The next paintings showed war. Humans fighting these shadow creatures with weapons that didn't look like anything from 5,000 years ago. Swords that glowed with inner light. People whose voices seemed to crack the very air around them. The battle scenes were epic, covering entire walls, and you could almost hear the clash of impossible weapons and the roar of supernatural forces, but the humans were losing. Painting after painting showed the shadow creatures overwhelming human cities, until finally they reached the last wall of the temple. This painting was different from all the others. It showed a gathering of humans, not fighting but talking. Old men and women with wise faces, standing before crowds of people. And in their hands, they held stone tablets covered with symbols. Dr. Rodriguez called her team's language expert, Professor Chun, to look at the tablets in the painting. He spent hours studying them with a magnifying glass, comparing them to ancient texts they had brought with them. When he finally looked up, his face was pale. "It's a contract," he said quietly, "a promise. They're agreeing to give up their voices, their words, their songs, everything that made them human, in a way, in exchange for ... In exchange for what?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. Professor Chun pointed to the final section of the painting. It showed the shadow creatures retreating, their ships disappearing into the sky. The humans were safe, but they all had their hands over their mouths. "In exchange for time," he said. "Time to prepare. Time to get ready. Because this contract, it has an expiration date." The temple had one more secret to reveal. Behind the final painting, they found a hidden chamber. Inside was a single stone pedestal with words carved in dozens of ancient languages. Professor Jian translated the main inscription, and when he read it out loud, everyone in the temple felt a chill run down their spine. When the darkness returns to claim what was promised, when the sky burns with their arrival, when the earth shakes with their hunger, only then may silence be broken. Only then may the true voice of humanity wake from its long sleep. Until that day we guard our power in quiet. Until that day we wait. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the inscription for a long time. 5,000 years ago, an entire civilization had made the ultimate sacrifice. They had given up their voices, their ability to speak and sing and laugh out loud, all to buy time for future generations. They had somehow known that the enemy would return, and they wanted their descendants to be ready, but ready for what? And why had speaking been so dangerous that they had to give it up completely? As she stood in that ancient temple, surrounded by the silent testimony of humanity's greatest secret, Dr. Rodriguez realized that her discovery was bigger than just old paintings and carved stones. Somewhere out there, the descendants of those silent people were still keeping the promise their ancestors had made, still waiting, still preparing. And if the inscription was right, that long wait was almost over. The darkness was coming back. And when it did, humanity would finally be allowed to break its 5,000-year silence. The question that kept Dr. Rodriguez awake at night was simple but terrifying. Would they remember how to fight when the time came? Looking at those painted warriors with their glowing weapons and voices that could crack stone, she hoped the answer was yes. Because something told her they were going to need every bit of that ancient power very, very soon. After Dr. Rodriguez's discovery in Peru, the archaeological world went crazy. Teams from every major university rushed to dig sites around the globe, all looking for more evidence of the silent civilization. What they found was beyond anything anyone had imagined. Dr. Thompson, a specialist in ancient cultures, found herself standing in what used to be a bustling marketplace in Turkey. But this wasn't like any ancient market she had ever studied. The stone counters were arranged in perfect circles with intricate symbols carved into each surface. These weren't random decorations, they were a complete communication system. She traced her finger along the symbols, trying to understand how people had bought and sold goods without saying a single word. The patterns were beautiful and complex, like a written language that had evolved far beyond anything humans use today. Each symbol seemed to tell a story, express an emotion, or describe something that would take dozens of spoken words to explain. But it was the houses that really amazed her. The silent people had built their homes in ways that seemed impossible for ancient times. Walls that curved in mathematical spirals, creating perfect acoustics for the smallest sounds. Rooms designed so that a person's footsteps would create different musical notes depending on where they walked. Gardens arranged in patterns that somehow made the wind sound like gentle melodies. Dr. Thompson realized that these people hadn't just given up speech. They had replaced it with something far more sophisticated. They had turned their entire world into a communication device. In one house, she found a family room with a floor made of different types of stone. When she accidentally dropped her water bottle, each stone made a different tone. She spent hours experimenting, stepping on different combinations until she figured out the pattern. It was a musical language. Families had talked to each other by dancing on their floors, creating songs that meant good morning or I love you or dinner is ready. The children's rooms were even more incredible. Instead of toys, there were walls covered with colored tiles that could be moved around to create pictures. Dr. Thompson found thousands of these tile arrangements, carefully preserved after 5,000 years. When she studied them, she realized they were stories. Children had been telling each other tales by moving colored squares around, creating moving pictures that were more vivid than any book. But the most amazing discovery came when Dr. Thompson's team found the school. The building was enormous, with classroom after classroom designed for different types of learning. But these weren't normal classrooms. Each room was built to teach children how to communicate without words in ways that seemed almost magical. One room had walls covered with mirrors arranged at specific angles. When children moved their hands in certain patterns, the mirrors would create light shows that spelled out complex ideas. Another room had a floor made of sand that had been somehow treated to hold shapes permanently. Students had learned to write by drawing in the sand with their feet, creating symbols so beautiful they looked like works of art. The most incredible room was at the center of the school. Dr. Thompson needed 3 weeks just to understand what it was for. The room was perfectly round, with a domed ceiling that had thousands of tiny holes in it. During the day, sunlight came through the holes in patterns that changed as the sun moved across the sky. At night, starlight did the same thing. When she finally figured it out, Dr. Thompson had to sit down. The children had learned to read time, weather, seasons, and even predict future events by watching the patterns of light on the floor. They had been taught to communicate with the natural world itself, but it wasn't just communication that had evolved. The silent people had developed abilities that seemed to border on supernatural. Dr. Harrison, an expert in ancient medicine, was studying what appeared to be a hospital when he made a discovery that changed everything. He thought he knew about human potential. The medical tools were unlike anything from the ancient world. Instruments made from materials that shouldn't have existed 5,000 years ago. Operating tables carved from single pieces of stone, shaped so precisely that modern machines couldn't duplicate them. But the real shock came when he found the medical records. The silent people had been able to heal injuries and diseases that modern medicine still struggles with. Broken bones that had been mended so perfectly that they were stronger than before they were injured. Evidence of successful brain surgery performed with tools that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Most incredible of all, records showing that some people had lived for hundreds of years. Dr. Harrison spent months trying to understand how this was possible. The answer came when he found the training manuals. The silent healers hadn't just used tools and medicines. They had learned to use their bodies in ways that modern humans couldn't imagine. By controlling their breathing, their heartbeat, even their brainwaves, they could somehow direct healing energy through their hands. The manuals showed step-by-step instructions for techniques that looked more like magic than medicine, but healing wasn't their only superhuman ability. Construction sites from the silent civilization showed that they had built things that should have been impossible. Stones weighing hundreds of tons moved into place with no evidence of ramps, pulleys, or any kind of machinery. Buildings that had somehow been carved out of solid rock in single pieces, with no tool marks anywhere. Dr. Martinez, an engineer studying these construction sites, finally found the answer in a workshop that had been preserved under a landslide. The tools weren't what she expected. Instead of hammers and chisels, she found rooms full of instruments that looked like musical equipment. Bowls made of different metals, each one tuned to create specific sound frequencies. Rods made of crystal that would vibrate when struck in certain ways. The silent people had learned to use sound as a construction tool. By creating the right combinations of frequencies, they could make stone soft enough to shape with their hands, then harden it again into any form they wanted. They had built their impossible cities by singing to the rocks. Even though they couldn't speak, every new discovery revealed that the silent civilization had developed human potential far beyond anything the modern world had achieved. They had learned to communicate through art, music, dance, and even direct contact with the natural world. They had unlocked abilities that seemed like magic but were really just aspects of human potential that had been forgotten. But all of these discoveries led to the same disturbing question. If these people had been so advanced, so powerful, so perfectly adapted to their silent world, why had they built weapons? Because everywhere the archaeologists dug, beneath the schools and hospitals and beautiful homes, they found armories, vast underground chambers filled with weapons that looked nothing like swords or spears. Crystalline devices that still hummed with energy after 5,000 years. Armor made from materials that couldn't be identified. Training grounds where the silent warriors had practiced fighting techniques that involved manipulating reality. itself. Dr. Rodriguez returned to the original temple in Peru, looking for answers. She studied the final paintings again, trying to understand what the silent people had been preparing for. The shadow creatures in the paintings were clearly advanced, clearly dangerous. But why would beings that powerful need to make a deal with humans? Why not just destroy everything and take what they wanted? The answer was hidden in the very last painting, so faded that she had almost missed it before. It showed the shadow creatures retreating, but they weren't leaving empty-handed. They were carrying something away with them. Something that glowed with the same light as the human weapons. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the painting for hours before she understood. The shadow creatures hadn't been defeated in the ancient war. They had been paid off. The humans had given them something valuable in exchange for time to prepare for their return, and whatever they had given up, the silent people had spent 5,000 years learning to live without it, growing stronger in other ways, developing new abilities to replace what they had lost. The terrifying question was, what had been so important that an entire civilization would sacrifice their voices to protect it? And when the shadow creatures returned to collect the rest of their payment, would humanity be ready to fight for it? Dr. Kim had been working the night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station for 3 years, and nothing exciting had ever happened. Her job was simple: watch the computer screens, record any unusual signals from space, and try not to fall asleep. Most nights, the only sounds were the quiet hum of machines and the occasional beep when a satellite sent back routine data. But on this particular Tuesday night, everything changed. It started as a small blip on her screen at exactly 3:17 a.m. Just a tiny spike in the radio frequencies coming from deep space. Dr. Kim almost ignored it. Space was full of random signals from dying stars and colliding asteroids. But something about this one made her pause. The signal was too regular, too purposeful. She leaned forward, adjusting her headphones and fine-tuning the receivers. The signal was definitely artificial. It had a pattern, a rhythm that repeated every few seconds. But it wasn't like any human radio transmission she had ever heard. It was older somehow, more complex, as if whoever sent it understood communication in ways that humans were just beginning to discover. Dr. Kim called her supervisor, Dr. Walsh, who lived 20 minutes away. While she waited for him to arrive, she tracked the signal source. Her hands started shaking when she saw the coordinates. The signal was coming from a part of space that was supposedly empty. No stars, no planets, nothing that could support life or technology. When Dr. Walsh arrived, still in his pajamas, Dr. Kim showed him the readings. His face went pale. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "About an hour now," she replied. "But Dr. Walsh, there's something else. The signal, it's getting stronger, a lot stronger." They spent the next few hours trying to decode the signal, but it was unlike anything in their databases. The pattern was incredibly sophisticated, layered with multiple frequencies that seemed to interact with each other in ways that created new meanings. It was like listening to a symphony where every note contained an entire song. By morning, Dr. Kim realized something that made her stomach drop. The signal wasn't just random communication. It was aimed directly at Earth, and it was scanning for something. The first response came from Stonehenge. Dr. Peterson, an archaeologist who had been studying the ancient stone circle for over a decade, was setting up equipment for a routine measurement when the stones began to vibrate. At first, he thought it was a small earthquake, but the vibration had a rhythm, a pattern that matched exactly with the signal Dr. Kim was receiving from space. Within hours, reports started coming in from around the world. The Great Pyramid in Egypt was resonating with the same frequency. Angkor Wat in Cambodia was humming with energy that made the air shimmer. Machu Picchu was glowing with a faint light that couldn't be explained. Ancient sites that had been silent for thousands of years were suddenly coming alive. Dr. Rodriguez, still studying the silent civilization sites, made the connection first. She was back at the temple in Peru when the walls started to vibrate. The carved symbols began to glow with the same soft light they had seen at other ancient sites. But more importantly, the symbols were changing. New carvings were appearing on the walls. Not carved by human hands, but somehow being written by the stones themselves. Dr. Rodriguez watched in amazement as words in the ancient language began to form, telling a story she had never seen before. The message was simple, but terrifying. They return. The promise is ending. Prepare. Around the world, similar messages were appearing at every site connected to the silent civilization. Always in the local ancient language, but always saying the same thing. The enemy was coming back, and the 5,000-year deal was about to expire, but the signal from space wasn't just activating ancient monuments. It was waking up something else. Dr. Kim noticed it first in the data. The signal from space was changing, responding to something on Earth. It wasn't just broadcasting anymore. It was having a conversation. Something on the planet was talking. Back. The source of the response signals baffled everyone at first. They were coming from remote locations around the world, deep forests, mountain valleys, isolated islands, places where no modern technology existed. But when satellite images were examined, the truth became clear. There were people in those locations. Communities that didn't appear on any maps, living in areas that were supposed to be uninhabited. And they were the ones responding to the signal. From space. Dr. Martinez, the engineer who had studied the silent civilization's construction techniques, was the first to reach one of these communities. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, guided by the signal responses, she found something that shouldn't have existed, a village of about 200 people living in perfect harmony with the forest around them. Their homes were built using the same impossible techniques she had found in the ancient ruins. Stone, shaped by sound, would grown into specific forms. Water channeled through patterns that created natural air conditioning. But the most incredible thing was the people themselves. They were completely silent, not mute. Dr. Martinez could see that they had all the physical ability to speak, but they chose not to. They communicated through the same hand gestures, musical patterns, and light displays that she had seen in the ancient ruins. These people were the direct descendants of the silent civilization, and they had been keeping the ancient promise for 5,000 years. The village elder, a woman who looked far older than any human should be able to live, approached Dr. Martinez without saying a word. She led her to the center of the village, where a stone platform had been built in the exact same style as the ancient temples. On the platform was a device that Dr. Martinez couldn't understand. It looked like a combination of crystal, metal, and stone, shaped into spirals and curves that seemed to bend light around them. The device was responding to the signal from space, pulsing with energy that made the air around it vibrate. The elder gestured for Dr. Martinez to watch, then placed her hands on the device. Immediately, the signal from space changed. It became stronger, more focused, and for the first time since it had started, it carried what sounded like words, but they weren't in any human language. Dr. Kim, still monitoring from the space station, recorded everything. The alien signal was now clearly a communication. It was speaking to the silent communities around Earth, and they were responding. But what they were saying to each other, no one could understand until the translation began. It started at the ancient sites first. The glowing symbols on the temple walls, the pyramid chambers, the stone circles, they all began to show the same message, translated into every ancient language that humans had ever spoken. The message was an ultimatum. 5,000 years have passed. The silence ends now. Return what was taken or face the consequences. You have 3 days to comply. Dr. Rodriguez stared at the translated message on the temple wall, her mind racing. The ancient deal was ending, just as the old carvings had warned, but what had been taken? What did the aliens want back? The answer came from the village in the Amazon. Dr. Martinez watched as the elder finally broke her community's 5,000-year silence. Her voice, when she spoke, was unlike anything human. It carried power that made the trees around them lean closer, that made the very air shimmer with possibility. They want our voices back, the elder said, her words carrying across the forest with unnatural clarity. 5,000 years ago, they gave us the power to speak reality into existence. We used it to fight them, to protect this world. When we couldn't defeat them completely, we made a bargain. We would stop using the power, hide it away, pretend to be weak and primitive. In exchange, they would leave Earth alone until they were strong enough to take the power back by force. Dr. Martinez felt her blood run cold. And now? The elder looked up at the sky where the alien signal was growing stronger by the hour. Now they're strong enough. The signal isn't just a communication, it's a summoning. They're calling their full fleet to Earth, and when they arrive, they'll take back the power they gave us, whether we're willing to give it up or not. Around the world, other silent communities were reaching the same conclusion. The ancient enemy was returning, not to conquer Earth, but to reclaim the supernatural abilities they had once given to humanity. The power to shape reality with words, to heal with touch, to build impossible things. All of it had originally come from the aliens, but humanity had learned to use this power in ways the aliens never expected. Instead of using it for destruction, they had used it for creation, for healing, for building a civilization based on harmony instead of conquest. The aliens wanted their power back, but they would be getting much more than they had originally given. The question now was whether humanity was ready to fight for the right to keep abilities that had never really belonged to them in the first place. Dr. Kim watched her monitors as more signals appeared across the solar system, ships, hundreds of them, moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. The 3-day ultimatum wasn't empty. The aliens were already on their way, and in hidden communities around the world, people who had been silent for 5,000 years were finally preparing to speak again. The first voice that broke the 5,000-year silence belonged to a child. Dr. Martinez was still in the Amazon village when it happened. The alien ultimatum had been delivered just hours before, and the entire community was gathered around the crystal device, waiting for instructions from their elder. The device was pulsing faster now, responding to the approaching alien fleet that Dr. Kim was tracking from space. Suddenly, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old stepped forward. She had been born into silence, just like her parents and grandparents before her. She had never heard her own voice. But as the alien ships drew closer, something inside her began to change. She opened her mouth and spoke a single word. No. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The word didn't just come out as sound, it came out as power. The air around the girl shimmered and cracked. Trees in a perfect circle around her began to grow at impossible speeds, their branches reaching toward the sky like protective arms. The ground beneath her feet turned to crystal, spreading outward in beautiful patterns that seemed to strengthen the earth itself. The elder smiled for the first time in decades. It begins, she whispered. All around the world, the same thing was happening. In a hidden valley in Tibet, an old man who had never spoken finally said his grandson's name. The mountains around them responded by shifting position, creating a natural fortress that could be seen from satellite images. Dr. Rodriguez, watching from her command center, couldn't believe what the geological sensors were showing. Entire mountain ranges were rearranging themselves. On a remote island in the Pacific, a woman spoke her first words to her husband after 60 years of silent marriage. "I love you," she said, and the ocean around their island became calm as glass while storms raged everywhere else. Ships trying to approach the island found themselves gently pushed away by currents that shouldn't exist. In the forests of Canada, an entire community of 200 people spoke together for the first time. Their combined voices created a dome of energy over their village that was visible from space, a shimmering barrier that seemed to bend light and make their home invisible to outside observers. Dr. Kim, still monitoring everything from the space station, was recording abilities that defied every law of physics she knew. The silent people weren't just talking, they were rewriting reality with their words. But it wasn't just the hidden communities that were awakening. Dr. Walsh, Dr. Kim's supervisor, made a discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about the situation. While analyzing the genetic data they had collected from the silent communities, he found something impossible. The DNA markers that indicated supernatural abilities weren't limited to the hidden villages. Every human on Earth carried them. The power wasn't something that only the silent people possessed. It was something that every person had the potential to unlock. The 5,000-year period of silence hadn't just been about hiding. It had been about letting the abilities spread through the entire human population. Dr. Martinez was the first modern human to experience the awakening personally. She was still in the Amazon village when the elder approached her with an offer that sounded like something from a fairy tale. "You carry the gift too," the elder said. "All humans do now. But you must choose to accept it. Once you speak with the true voice, there is no going back. You will see the world as it really is, feel the connections between all living things, understand the power that flows through everything. But you will also carry the responsibility that comes with such abilities." Dr. Martinez thought about the approaching alien fleet, about the ultimatum that gave humanity just 3 days to surrender powers they were only now learning they possessed. She thought about her years of studying impossible architecture, of wondering how the silent people had built their magnificent cities. She made her choice. "I accept," she said. The moment the words left her mouth, everything changed. She could suddenly see energy flowing through the trees around her, connecting every living thing in the forest in a web of light. She could feel the thoughts and emotions of every person in the village. Most incredibly, she could sense the approaching alien ships as dark spots moving through the energy field that surrounded Earth. But with the new awareness came understanding of just how dangerous their situation really was. The aliens weren't just technologically advanced. They were beings of pure energy who had learned to manipulate reality on a cosmic scale. They had given humans the power to speak things into existence because they thought primitive humans would never learn to use it properly. They had expected humans to destroy themselves with the gift, leaving Earth empty and ready for colonization. Instead, humanity had learned to use the power responsibly, to build instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm. This made them incredibly dangerous to the aliens who ruled through fear and destruction. A species that could reshape reality through cooperative effort was a threat to their entire way of life. Around the world, more and more people were making the choice to awaken their abilities. Dr. Rodriguez, back at her temple in Peru, found herself standing before a group of local villagers who had come to see the glowing symbols on the walls. When she explained what was happening, what the symbols meant, nearly all of them chose to accept their heritage. The awakening spread like a wave across the local population. Farmers who spoke to their crops found them growing into shapes that could provide perfect nutrition for their families. Teachers who spoke to their students found knowledge flowing directly from mind to mind. Doctors who spoke to injuries found them healing at supernatural speeds. But it wasn't just about individual abilities. When groups of awakened humans worked together, their combined power was exponentially stronger. Dr. Kim watched from space as entire cities began to transform. In Lima, near Dr. Rodriguez's dig site, awakened residents worked together to speak their city into a fortress. Buildings grew taller and stronger, streets rearranged themselves into defensive patterns, and a dome of protective energy covered the entire metropolitan area. In New York, awakened humans created shields of pure force that could stop any weapon. In Tokyo, they spoke transportation systems into existence that could move people instantly across the city. In London, they built communication networks that connected every awakened mind in a web of shared consciousness. The transformation was happening so fast that governments around the world couldn't keep up. Military leaders found that their weapons were useless against people who could speak bullets out of existence. Politicians discovered that their authority meant nothing to citizens who could create better systems, with a few carefully chosen words. But the most incredible change was happening to the planet itself. As more humans awakened, Earth began to respond to their collective voice. Polluted rivers cleaned themselves overnight. Damaged forests regrew in hours instead of decades. The climate itself began to stabilize as awakened humans spoke to the atmosphere, asking it to find balance. Dr. Martinez now fully awakened and serving as a liaison between the hidden communities and the modern world, realized that the aliens had made a terrible mistake. They had given humanity the power to reshape reality, then left them alone for 5,000 years to learn how to use it. In that time, humans had not only mastered the abilities but had also learned to work together. In ways the aliens couldn't imagine, the alien fleet was still approaching, their dark ships visible now even to normal telescopes. They expected to find a primitive world populated by weak humans who had forgotten how to use their gifts. Instead, they were going to encounter a planet full of beings who had learned to speak to reality itself and make it listen. Dr. Kim's final transmission before the aliens arrived was both a warning and a promise. To anyone listening out there in space, she broadcast, humanity is no longer silent. We remember who we are, what we can do, and why our ancestors made their sacrifice. If you're coming here to take back what you think belongs to you, you should know that we're not the same species you left behind 5,000 years ago. We've grown stronger, wiser, and more united than you ever imagined possible. As her words reached space, they carried with them the combined will of billions of awakened humans. The message wasn't just a communication, it was a demonstration of power that could be felt across the solar system. The 5,000-year silence was over. Humanity had found its true voice, and they were ready to use it to defend their world.